Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast episode of Exceeding Your Benchmark, brought to you by Benchmark Products. I'll be your host for today, Gabrielle, and I am thrilled to be joined right now by Sheba Zaman, who's head of product specialist and training services at Novatek International. Today, we're going to be talking about connecting data to improve your contamination control strategy. So here to enlighten us on the subject, as well as provide any and all actionable insights, is Sheba. So Sheba, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So to start off, let's give our audience just a better idea of who you are and your background. So let's start with a brief bio, including your name, title, and just what it is you do in your industry.
Absolutely. So I'm Sheba Zaman. I am head of the product specialist and training services group at Novatek International. So we are front-end experts of the software applications that Novatek makes. So Novatek makes a series of different software applications. One of the suites is specifically for contamination control. That's the topic today, including environmental monitoring, utility monitoring, cleaning validation. They also have a suite for laboratories, like a laboratory information management system, as well as quality management systems. So I've been at Novatek for almost 22 years. June 1st will be 22 years. I started when I was 3. That's the story I go with. And basically my job is to, my team basically, we're front-end experts. So we help implement the software solutions. We process map, kind of the current process, and we help improve that process into bringing it to digitalized solutions.
Wow. So you were quite literally born to be in this industry. Well, I mean, you're going to know some of the most common challenges that pharmaceutical manufacturers, they face day to day, when it comes to managing compliance data, such as cleaning validation and environmental monitoring data. So just what are some of those challenges?
Yeah, so there's a huge hesitancy in our industry, understandably, to move towards digitalized solutions. Like if we look at media companies, they're far more ahead in the digital maturity. Pharma has to take into account a lot of different regulations and liability and consider obviously product safety, patient health. But in that challenge or hesitancy to digitalize, what you end up seeing is a lot of data silos. So you have kind of one system to manage this aspect of the process, a different system to manage the other side of the process, which means that data analysis frequently for contamination control is done in silos. It has to be done in a hybrid, or it has to be communicated manually, especially when incidents occurs. And what I also see, in a challenge that I see, is that companies will take their existing sort of more manual paper process and just transfer that same process into a computer solution, which is really digitized. And that's the difference between digitization and digitalization. So an extra syllable there to trip on. But the difference is really that one has more analysis and really takes advantage of technological tools, right? If you're just converting your manual process, then you're still stuck with the analysis that you could do on paper. If you improve that process and connect all the elements of contamination control, let's say in this case, then you have the ability to really get insight into your process, get insight into potential improvements or into incidents when they do occur.
Well, is this true that there's not a single solution for managing contamination in their manufacturing processes? And if that is true, how can technology provide visibility in a holistic manner? I mean, what are some of the benefits that can be brought to companies in terms of decision-making, but also trend analysis?
Yeah, so I think, Novatek's goal is to be a full holistic solution provider for contamination control. I don't think we see that a lot on the market. And I think companies, what they've had to do is sort of either, again, communicate manually or hybrid, or, export data to data lakes and kind of combine the data there, which is sort of IT heavy. And some organizations do have the resources to do that. and kind of look at all their data silos and bring them together. But it is quite an endeavor. And it needs to be done to satisfy regulatory requirements for analysis, especially now with Annex 1. It is necessary to help identify root cause. Otherwise, we're doing a little too much manually. There is a delay in seeing the trends if it is done manually. But probably most importantly for future improvement is to be able to identify patterns to prevent contamination prior to occurrence. And so, Novatek has really made strides to kind of be a holistic provider of contamination control, data management. And, we're hoping to see more demand for that. That'll make, other companies as well provide solutions and options for managing that and kind of avoiding the data silos that we see today.
Well, there are just so many digital solutions out there, and there are concerns with some pharmaceutical companies about just hesitancy to implement all of these digital solutions due to concerns about the data integrity, but also changing compliance regulations. So how do you think these concerns should be addressed?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it's not a quick solution to it. There are a lot of concerns, such as cybersecurity is a big concern, data integrity is a big concern. So companies just do have to make the investment to mitigate the risks of, for example, cybersecurity. They need to do a data integrity risk assessment. So for any solution that they are implementing, to go through kind of the data integrity guidance requirements and basically go through the solution and ensure that both your process and your solutions are meeting the data integrity requirements. Go through that validation process, especially PQ validation, I think really needs to cover exactly how you will be using the system. You do need to identify the risks of data management in general, where your company might be risking kind of data integrity that's very specific to your process, and then how that can be controlled, whether procedurally, whether through software solutions and enforced. Obviously, the latter is the preferred when possible because there is no choice. With humans, there's always the risk of error and best practices when they're enforced. Ensure that kind of that culture and that process really does change permanently.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, it can always be a challenge when implementing interconnected compliance systems. So just what are some of the common mistakes you see pharmaceutical manufacturers making when documenting their user requirements?
Yeah, so frequently, the first thing I mentioned about digitization and transferring the existing process to a solution is one mistake I see. They're not leaving room for improvement, so your process should change when you transfer to a digitalized solution. The other thing is if there is an existing solution that they're using, so not a paper process, but they're looking to create user requirements to get a new system or improve or upgrade the current system, frequently the user requirements are also based on that, which they shouldn't be. It should be based on the future process that you envision. And the other issue that I do think is a big challenge, especially that the people writing user requirements are experts in science and, let's say, microbiology, contamination control, sterility assurance, but not necessarily computer experts. And the way the requirements should be written should be from a very general perspective. And in other words, there's a difference between writing user requirements and design specifications. So frequently I see user requirements are too specific in how the solution should seem. So I think when writing user requirements, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of this requirement? What is the reason I need this requirement. What do I need to satisfy? Why am I asking for this, let's say feature, etc., and really get to the root of it. And that's how the requirement should be written generally. What that does is it opens you up to getting a solution that's designed in the best way, where sort of computer engineers can decide the best way to satisfy that requirement. So, if we're talking about an iPhone, instead of saying, I want to be able to use my fingers and zoom in, you should be able to say, I want to be able to read any of the text on my phone, or I want to be able to zoom in even. And then it's up to the engineers to say, okay, the best way is to put two fingers and, expand. So, really creating the requirements with the purpose in mind.
Well, we're seeing a large rise of digital transformation. I mean, have you seen compliance software, the evolution? How are you seeing that? I guess if we're looking to the future, evolving in the pharmaceutical industry, how are you seeing that evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? What are your predictions there?
I think there will be a huge transformation in our industry. For one, when I started at Novatek, regulatory requirements were hoping your systems, you need to prove that your systems are as secure, in software solutions as it would be on paper. And then it kind of gradually evolved to software systems are more secure. There's always kind of a digital trace there, so they're more secure than paper, which can be sort of destroyed. And now it's you need to use them. And now we're also understanding kind of the difference between digitization and digitalization. We're understanding, so these regulatory bodies are really encouraging these solutions in order to provide the analysis possible, in order to truly identify root cause and not leave incidents sort of with an unidentifiable root cause. And there is a lot of room for transformation, and the technology is there, and it can be made secure. I frequently hear media companies, if we're talking about Meta, or I hear people say, oh, it Meta read my mind and put an ad for, something I just thought about and didn't tell anyone, and it's reading my mind. It's absolutely not, right? It has such good algorithms and such good analysis of big data that it knows what you want before or at the same time you want it. The profiling is so good. And if you think about it, pharma is a world behind that. But there's so much room for improvement to get to that level of digital maturity where we have such good automated contamination control that really we're automating that we're, manufacturing becomes really, really lean because we're predicting problems prior to them occurring. We're making the process as efficient as possible. We're sort of removing humans. Humans can be used then in decision making and analysis versus in the input portion. So I think we're going to see a lot more humans interacting on the output portion of data and, and doing more analysis and more decision making versus on the input and sort of the more, menial tasks of recording information. So I look forward to seeing kind of where the industry goes from now.
Well, as we start to close up the podcast here, Sheba, is there any thing that you want to leave our audience with as we come away from this conversation? What's something you'd like to leave with our audience?
Yeah, I would say is, especially for the scientists out there that are not as comfortable with software solutions, it's something you can really take your time and explore, follow a good plan, and just go through it and not be afraid of kind of the challenges of cybersecurity and risk assessment. And it is sort of a hurdle to get there. There is a lot of work to get to that point of digitalization, but it certainly is worth it in the end. And it's also inevitable. So, in order to sort of beat out your competitors and whatnot, it is a road that you must go down. The resources are there to help you and guide you through. Like Novatek works as a partner with you, with any organization to do so. And I'm sure other vendors would as well. So really seek out someone who will be your technology partner and kind of guide you as needed through those steps.
Well, that wraps up the conversation for today. So thank you, Sheba, for joining us on today's podcast to discuss ways to improve your contamination control strategy through connecting data. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Great discussion, great questions regarding digitalization.
Of course. And as always, if you'd like to learn more, please visit benchmarkproducts.com and look for this podcast wherever it is you get your podcasts at. I've been your host, Gabrielle. Thanks for tuning in.